at-large candidates for Amherst's Town Council. I also want to share with you that it's 32 degrees outside, Celsius. So we can just go along and make believe. So I am Adrienne Terrizzi of the League of Women Voters, the organization behind tonight's event. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. It is an organization of men and women of all ages and backgrounds with a common interest: empowering voters and making democracy work. A healthy democracy in which the citizens are informed and are actively engaged in shaping government policies, where government solicits and values citizens' involvement. That is the League's mission, and that is the purpose for tonight's forum. Now, in 6 days, we're all aware that we're heading to the polls. You're going to the same precincts you always have to vote in the state primary and the local preliminary election. Tuesday's election will select 6 of the 7 at-large candidates to be on the November ballot. Now, we do have much information in the lobby. If you have not checked the tables, please do. But let me just take a moment. This is a specimen ballot. While the preliminary election will narrow the field of 7 candidates to 6, we get to vote for 3. So the instructions are clear. Take a look at the tables and then head to the polls on Tuesday where you ordinarily go. I do have a few announcements before we move on. Election workers. I think we've all heard how much election workers are needed this year in all 10 precincts. So please call the town clerk's office tomorrow and tell her the League sent you. Also, absentee deadline ballot is this Friday, 5 p.m. at the clerk's office. And on Friday, the League's election guide, where candidates have answered League questions, will appear in the Amherst Bulletin, and it's already online at our website. So I want to extend some appreciation. We can't do this all by ourselves. And I would like to say, first and foremost, to the staff and to the crew who's here tonight from Amherst Media, our local access cable partner, in assisting us to empower and inform our voters by recording this forum, and also for taping all the council candidates' statements, which I hope you've seen because they've been running for several weeks and still are on demand and on Channel 17. Also, my appreciation is extended to the town IT staff, to the staff in the physical facilities and the schools for hosting and assisting us tonight. And thank you to you, our intrepid audience, for joining us tonight. So if you'll all be seated, I would next ask you to silence your cell phones, please, and also help me to welcome tonight's moderator. She is Becky Shannon from the Northampton League of Women Voters. Becky.
Thank you, Adrienne. All right, so we're beginning on this hot evening, and again, thank you for all coming out. Our candidates tonight for the at-large seats are Alyssa Brewer, Bob Greene, Mandy Jo Haneke, Rob Kussner, Dylan Maxfield, Jim Pastrang. There's a 7th candidate, Andy Steinberg, and he could not be with us tonight. I will be reading a statement later that he has given to us. There are index cards and pencils available for the audience to write down questions for the candidates. It's important that a question be addressed to all candidates, and when you're done writing out your question, raise the card above your head and a League representative will pick it up. A League panel will quickly review the questions, perhaps combining similar questions and choosing questions that allow for the greatest range of topics. The questions will then be passed to me, and I will give them to the candidates. The candidates will be given 90 seconds to answer each question. In order to be fair, it is critically important that the candidates adhere to the amount of time allowed. You have 90 seconds, and when you have 30 seconds left, a timekeeper in the front row will hold up a sign, and at the end of your 90 seconds, there'll be a firm signal to stop. At that time, please finish up your statement quickly with a few words. The forum will conclude with a 2-minute closing statement from each candidate. I hope everybody's cell phone is off. Make sure you know where the exits are. And lastly, we ask that you not clap after a candidate's statement or response. We will have a hearty round of applause at the end of the evening. And because we have so many candidates to go through the questions with, we're going to try and be very efficient and do as many questions as we can. And we'll begin now with our 2-minute statements. And because Andy Steinberg is not available, I will now read his written statement, after which we will hear from our panel of candidates, and we'll begin with Dylan. So I'm going to put on my Andrew Steinberg hat, and I will be Andrew for a little bit. I am sorry that I cannot be with you this evening. I made a commitment in January, before the date of the primary was known, the charter election, and my decision to be a candidate. It is an honor to serve you as a member of the Select Board. I am a candidate for the Town Council and ask for your vote on September 4th and again in November. I offer you extensive experience and continuity as we transition to this new form of government. You can find more information about me on my website, andyforamherst.org. First, a little bit about my experience. My work career was in providing legal aid in civil matters to poor people. I came to Amherst in 1980 when I became executive director of Western Massachusetts Legal Services. In my 26 years in that position, I was both the chief lawyer and the chief executive of a nonprofit organization. The legal, financial, and management experience of running a legal aid program helped me to fulfill my role on the Select Board. Before serving on that board, I was a member of town meeting, then a member of the Finance Committee and its chair for 3 years. Of course, I gained additional experience as a member of the Select Board. Here are 4 examples of the many things I have accomplished working with you and for you. First, the Select Board hires, supervises, and evaluates the town manager. The town faced a crisis with the sudden loss of our former town manager, John Musanti. The board hired 2 interim town managers and then Paul Bockelman, who just completed his 2nd year in the position. Second, the fall 2017 town meeting passed a zero energy building bylaw. The goal was admirable, but it would have been difficult, if not impossible, to implement. I chaired a working group of 8 people, 4 from the sponsors of the town meeting article, and 4 designated by the Select Board and town manager. We wrote a new zero energy bylaw that can achieve the goal, was enacted at the recent town meeting, and is a model already being considered by another Massachusetts town. Third, I was involved in the Regional Bike Share Program, which is a consortium of 5 communities and the university. I contributed my legal and governance experience to achieve a workable agreement that was adopted and has led to a successful launch of the program. Fourth, I helped to negotiate the town's agreement with Comcast and contract with Amherst Media to provide you with community public access, government, and education programming. If I am elected to serve on the town council, I will contribute my experience and assure a smooth transition from town meeting and the select board to the council. Amherst has some major challenges. I refer you to my website for a presentation of my vision for Amherst, including how we can meet these challenges. Again, it is andyforamherst.org. I ask for your vote so that I can provide experience and continuity as the council becomes our representative governing body. Thank you, Andrew Steinberg. And now we'll begin with Dylan.
How do I sound? Good? Fantastic. All right, so my name is Dylan Maxfield. I moved to Amherst about 5 years ago. I came here to study at UMass, and then I took some time off to do some work, and now I've returned to finish my degree at UMass. And you know, I don't have the policy expertise nor the local government experience that most of the other candidates up here do. So I'd like to tell a little bit of a personal story to convey, you know, I have a different type of experience. Me and my siblings growing up, we all had ADHD, and from the school system where I was at, it didn't have the ability to give us support that we needed. So my parents had to refinance their home to pay for us to go to private schools, but we're all working class people, and in 2008, when my father passed away, he left my mother with a home loan worth twice the value of the house and now half the income to pay for it. My mother files for bankruptcy, and our home is foreclosed on. And since that point, you know, I've worked a variety of jobs to support myself, and like many people of my generation, while trying to pursue my undergraduate degree, all the while acquiring enormous amounts of debt we'll be paying off for decades to come. Now, I say this not to elicit sympathy or anything like that, but to tell you really what my perspective is and what it is I'm trying to bring to the council. I'm a working class person from a working class family. My mother was an administrative assistant over at Framingham State. My father was a bus driver. My oldest sister is a nurse, and my brother a police officer. Resilient bunch, we do good for ourselves, but this is why I had chose to run at large, because I wanted to represent working class people wherever they are in Amherst, because I personally know just how hard it can be just to get by. Thank you.
Jim, please hold your applause.
Hi, I'm Jim Pitstrang. Thank you to the League, and thank you to all who are participating and listening to this forum. I moved to Amherst 30 years ago with my family. I'm a software developer, and I've owned my own company since 1992. I've been passionately involved in several community activities in Amherst. 25 years ago, I founded the middle school Ultimate Frisbee program, and I've been coaching ever since. I've also been active since 1996 in Amherst Leisure Services Community Theater as an actor, crew member, producer, and for the past 17 years as the production stage manager. I was a town meeting member for 19 years, and for the past 6 years, I have served as town moderator. I've served on 3 different town committees in the past 4 years: the Town Meeting Electronic Voting Committee, the Town Manager Preliminary Search Committee, and the Amherst Dog Park Task Force. I was elected to be chair of all 3 committees. As moderator, I was also the appointing authority for the Finance Committee. I voted against the charter. I understood, perhaps better than anybody else, the flaws with town meeting, but I believed it would be possible to change and improve the process. However, a clear majority wanted a change, and we are now embarking on a new chapter in the political history of our town. I want to help ensure that our new form of government is successful. If elected, my priorities are to replace or rebuild our aging elementary schools, build a new South Amherst fire station, and establish appropriate zoning bylaws that support downtown village center density in accordance with the character and needs of the community. I am eager to help establish the process to be followed by the council. Council agendas, deliberations, and decisions must follow agreed-upon protocol and be responsive to voices from all segments of our community. I look forward to providing details on my qualifications and positions this evening and throughout the fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Mandy Jo Haneke. I've lived here with my family for 7 years, and Amherst is a great town with terrific places to shop, eat, play, and visit. Yet we're facing some big challenges in the next 3 years. I'm running for counselor at large so that I can help find the solutions. And experience matters. I was vice chair of the Charter Commission, sat for 7 years on town meeting, served on the committee along with Jim over here that proposed and implemented electronic voting in town meeting, and currently serve as the renter representative to the rental bylaw implementation group. I'm a court-appointed special advocate at Friends of Children, and I was president of the Pioneer Valley Symphony for 3 years and have been on the board for 6. In all of these positions, I have worked collaboratively with others to find the right solutions to the issues at hand. So what do I want to accomplish on the town council? I want Amherst government to actively engage all residents, including those who have traditionally been left out, as we work towards the solutions to the challenges facing Amherst. One of those looming challenges is our aging infrastructure. We have at least 4 major capital projects on the horizon. We need to move forward on them with a comprehensive funding plan and timeline. The voices of Amherst voters matter on these projects, which are a huge investment for our town. Our legislators must be thoughtful and fiscally responsible when considering them. But the councilors must listen to the residents, too. If the residents support the projects, we need to find a way to responsibly fund them. And if the residents don't, then we need to find another way forward. Another of Amherst's challenges is increasing affordable housing and planning for growth in town. Increasing the commercial base in town may lead to lower taxes on residential property, making it more affordable for families to live here. But we can't pursue growth that's out of step with what our residents desire. We need to make sure new buildings fit the character of the surrounding neighborhoods. I look forward to expanding on these ideas tonight and hope that afterwards you'll support me for counselor at large in next week's election. Thank you.
Rob.
Good evening, everybody. Rather than reading a statement, I think I'll just try to ad-lib as I usually do. I'm Rob Kussner. I've been in town also for 3 decades. I'm a faculty member at the University of Massachusetts. And even before I taught a class there, I became involved in local government. It was because where I moved in South Amherst, the bus system was about to lose all service. And I walked around and asked other people who had been using it what they were going to do, and they said, well, why don't we send a petition? And so that's what I did. And somehow we got the bus preserved, and eventually I got involved with the public transit system planning in town. I was invited to join the Public Transportation Committee in the early 90s. And eventually I was chairing it, and it was a good time to work on public transit. Someone in the audience here knows about it because he was our congressperson, and public transit was being properly supported. That's one thing I'd like to accomplish if I should be elected to the town council, is to try to restore robust public transit not only in town but in the region. The last thing that I've done as a matter of public service was I served, in fact, at the request of that very same person, as the chair of the Norwottuck Rail Trail Advisory Committee. It took a long time to get the project done, but I found it an interesting consensus-building experience. There were very divergent views on what should be done for that trail, and I worked very hard to basically listen to all voices in that project. As you probably know, I've served as a select board member about 15 years ago, and I've served as a town meeting member for many years. I'd like to help make the transition from town meeting to this new form of government sound and make good decisions. Thank you very much.
Bob.
Hi, I'm Bob Greeny, and I'm very happy to be here. Wow, what a great crowd in the audience. I wasn't expecting it. So I built this awesome website, and we may not get to address all the issues tonight, so please go there and see my position on all the issues. And if you just want to go to the website, you can save paper and just take this card with the web address on it. You'll find that on the table outside. I've been in town for 24 years, 4 children through the Amherst public school system. I've been teaching physics at HCC, that's Holyoke Community College, for the entire 24 years. I hope during the questions I'll get to address the vast range of issues, but there's one that stands out for me, so I'm going to address that, just that one right now. In my opinion, the current development trend in Amherst Town Center is the single most important issue in this election. Our town center, in appearance and ambiance, is moving rapidly in a direction that will be irreversible and radically different from what many of us want. This election may be your last chance to have any leverage or voice on this matter. In the absence of town meeting, it will be the council that will redirect or support the current trajectory. There are 4 more paragraphs here. You'll have to go to my website to see them.
Alyssa.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Alyssa Brewer. Thank you for coming out tonight to learn about the Town Council, and thank you to the League of Women Voters, Amherst Media, and the schools for providing this venue, and lots of fans, so thank you. I am one of your 5 select board members, and I have been since 2007. I hope you will vote for me as Councilor at Large for Amherst's first Town Council. I'm running at large because our community needs experienced, passionate, proven leadership at this historic moment in local governance. I have served in town-wide elected office for 16 years and can bridge the transition to a constituent-based legislature that incorporates far more than 13 people's views. Our new town council needs councilors who have a record of crafting workable solutions by continuously building and rebuilding coalitions with a variety of people around different issues. The purpose of town governance is not to stop things that don't seem quite perfect. It's to pursue the things our residents value. We value affordable housing, so we need to build it, even if the location doesn't immediately seem quite perfect. We value public education, so we need to fix our school infrastructure, even if we aren't 100% in agreement with the school committee about the educational programs being offered. We value leaving our children a habitable planet, so we need to explore multiple alternatives to fossil fuels while we find better ways to get people downtown, to buy both things and experiences, and to build responsibly, but not make it impossible to build at all. We value diversity, so finding ways to connect various communities of interest to the discussions and decisions that they care about must be our daily challenge. We can move forward together.
Thank you, candidates. We'll begin the questions now with Jim, and we'll go down the line, ending with Dylan. How are you preparing to engage in the new budget process specified in the charter?
Thank you. The budget process is a nearly year-long event that happens. Basically, the town manager works with his staff and department heads to determine what their proposed budgets are. Town council is going to be involved first with the town manager to determine what those thresholds are going to be, what the guidelines are going to be for the departments. We're coming into the budget process a little late this year, so that part might be a little tricky to get up to speed on. But basically, from that point forward, the department heads will submit their budgets to the town manager and to the town council, I imagine. The town council will review them, work with the department heads and the town manager to determine what portions of the budget might need to be added to, what might to be cut. Another important thing the town council is going to be doing is setting some policy guidelines on where we want to see emphasis in the budget, things that we think are important and need to be included that might not have been included, things that the town council might feel are less important. Also in this mix, we need to hear from the public. So a big thing that the council is going to be doing is figuring out what the process is, how we're going to hear from the public, when we're going to hear from the public, fairly early in the process, so there can be public input on the emphasis that we place on the budget. Thank you.
Mandy Jo.
Thank you. The new charter specifies a couple of new things for the budget, and so I'm looking forward to engaging with those new items, one of which is the required forums before the budget is presented to the town council to talk to residents about what they want to see in the budget and their questions with the budget. That's going to be something that is extremely important in a budget, and one that I am well suited to trying to facilitate. As a charter commissioner, I helped facilitate forums before decisions were made, and this is something that needs done with a budget too, so that people who are concerned with specific aspects of the budget can talk to the department heads and all before the budget's decided and before it's presented to the council. The council will also be appointing some members to the budget coordinating group, which is the group that does get together to determine sort of the large overall guidelines. So I would hope to be a part of that process if I was on the council, and to look at all of the guidelines there to set those long-range goals and everything. The other thing I'm doing to prepare is, you just have to read the budget. And that's an important thing, to understand where the money is going. We spend a lot of our budget on schools, and you need to talk to the people that are spending that money to figure out why they're spending it there. So that's another thing I'm doing to prepare. Thank you.
Rob.
So I have three things to say on this. First, in March of 2005, when I joined the select board, I thought we had barely enough time to deal with that fiscal year's budget that was coming up, and so this seems like a luxurious amount of time. But in all seriousness, we've replaced the longstanding institution of the town, the finance committee, with what will become partially a subcommittee of this council and perhaps other members that will be one of the ways that public input and information to the public will come about. And I think that's an important feature perhaps of the new system of government, but it's not up and running yet. So I think it's going to be important to have that up and running and not only engage the public for their input, but also have information coming out in a very transparent way from the manager, from departments, and of course from the other main bodies of the town, the schools in particular that have large budgets. Actually, are you holding up the 30-second slide? Okay. The other thing I want to say is that there's a provision of the charter which I'm still scratching my head over as a mathematician, as someone who uses logic in axiomatic thinking, and that's the provision it's sort of a ratchet, if you will. It's the provision that requires the town manager to present items and only technically allows the council to lower those amounts. It's been a tradition for town meeting to be able to raise or lower the amounts, and sometimes that's necessary in response to conditions. So I think it's going to be an interesting new project, and I hope to be involved with that.
Bob.
So I see three groups interacting to craft the best possible budget given our resources. And so there's the town professionals, and obviously we listen carefully to their perception about what we can afford and how much we can borrow. Then I'm going to lean on the side of restraint. I'll be very clear about that. So Amherst has a wonderful library and a wonderful school system, and I'm not talking about putting that at risk, but really being very diligent about maximizing the use of the funds we have. And so that will happen in the council with myself and the other councilors. And then there's the public. So this is a provision of the charter, but I would do this anyway. And I hope that I would be available and even seeking out your opinion on our spending priorities for the budget each year.
Alyssa.
Thank you. So, of course, the Select Board is involved every year in developing budget policy guidelines around the same time that the Finance Committee has traditionally put out guidelines as to how much money we can afford. And yes, the process is changing. Although in this transition period, the Select Board is going to be looking a little bit about whether or not we think we want to give any advice to the incoming council, just as the Finance Committee will probably want to give advice to the incoming council in the same way. I think it's important that we remember that forums and public meetings and public hearings are all very different things. And one of the things that's actually an advantage in the new charter is the way some of those things are structured so that it's clear that people are really coming to a budget forum where they're really going to be heard about budget issues rather than just expecting them to show up for a particular agenda item on a particular night. It is going to be really important for the council and its finance committee to have a good working relationship with the school committee and the library trustees, which has developed over many years associated with the budget coordinating group. That's the place where when the schools say, wow, we're just facing a really tough time, we look to see if we can shift money one direction or another. And that has to happen before the budget ends up getting proposed to the council because, as was pointed out, the council won't be able to increase. It will only be able to decrease or with the town manager's approval.
And Dylan.
Yeah, so I would say as far as the budget goes, obviously we have to do it in such a way that is transparent, and I like that we will be doing it in a way that engages with the public. And something else I would say that we would have to do when we engage with our departments to see what it is that they need, the people where we're going to be spending this money, something I'd like to do as well is I'd really like to take the time to try to engage with not just our department heads, but our rank and file people who work in these departments, because a lot of the time they know what it is that they need best, and I want to engage these people as well as the general public as to best get a fair and adequate budget.
Thank you. Mandy Jo, you'll answer first. How do you envision the council reaching out to voters and residents to inform about council debates, issues, and include a broader swath of people in decision making?
So I envision doing something more than what the Charter Commission did when I was on the Charter Commission. I think that was a good start, and I think we can do more. We reached out to other nonprofits in town to try and hold meetings in those locations, and at times that meetings weren't normally held in the middle of the day, in the mornings or just after work, so that more residents could make them when they were there, and we held them in various locations in town. I envision definitely doing that again if I'm on the council, but going further, reaching out to more nonprofits, more apartment complexes, more businesses, and saying, can we have meetings here, can we have forums there, and at different times, on weekends, early mornings, similar to what Paul has done with his Cup of Joe, to be able to do more. But you can't just rely on that. You have to go and talk to people too. So you need to make those connections with everyone, with the apartment complexes, with people living in them, so that you can find out what they need and how they need what they need in order to engage with the council. The other thing is you need as a council to affirmatively send the stuff out to people in a way that's easily understandable and easily informed. You can't wait for the minutes to come out 2 weeks after a meeting when another meeting's already held. You need to send them out and summaries out early and all. We did it on the Charter Commission, and I think we can continue that efforts with the council so that everyone can engage at the level they want and we can reach more people.
Rob.
So I'm going to go in a little bit different direction here. So Amherst has always had a very robust committee system. And it's engaged hundreds and hundreds of people. I mean, the town has lots and lots of very knowledgeable, passionate people. And the system's been a way of organizing that passion into pulling usually in the same direction. I mean, I mentioned a little bit of my early experience. When I was bicycling here this afternoon, I was thinking, who was the guy from, I think, Amherst College who used to come by my house to take me to, I think, the Town Commercial Relations Committee. It was Bob Gross, if anyone remembers Bob. I remember he'd come to my house, and he got me engaged in the committee system in the town. And I think one thing that the council's going to have to do, it's going to need the help of its many knowledgeable citizens, and it's going to need to broaden. I mean, he was reaching out to me kid in his 20s when I first came here to help with doing some aspect of town government. I think we need to do that strongly. The other thing I think we should try to encourage, I say this with some trepidation, is an informal system of petitions. The new charter has a very high bar to formally petitioning the body that some of us may be elected to in a few months. And nevertheless, the select board and town meeting have always responded, I think, quite favorably to informal petitions. And town meeting has had a very informal petition process that allowed things to come forward. We need to encourage that. Thank you.
Bob.
I think that we should constantly be looking for better ways to do this. But the first place is we need to make those public forums that we do have, that we have had, more responsive. So I think a lot of us have had the experience that we go to the public forums and we don't feel heard. And part of the problem is the forums come too late. Decisions have already been made, really. And there's a feeling that these are pro forma activity that is having no effect. And we can think about this in terms of downtown development, in terms of parking, and in terms of the schools. The failure of the school, which divided our town deeply, was the lack of inclusion and participation in the early formative stages of that process. So that's what I will focus on, making sure that any major project is open to public input before decisions have been made, before a direction has already been set. And I think we can avoid a lot of the divisiveness that we've seen in our town by practicing that better.
Alyssa.
Great. So associated with community participation in things that haven't already perhaps been said, one of the difficulties has always been balancing the legal requirements for letting people know about meetings and letting people know on a relatively specific level, at least 48 hours ahead of time, what we're going to be talking about, versus what real community expectations are in terms of people knowing enough ahead of time, not just 48 hours or 72 hours ahead of time, but to really know that something's under discussion and that it's going to be talked about more than once. That's not something we've been doing a terrific job at the Select Board, although that's not a legislative body, it is a policy-making body. It's been one of the difficulties with getting people engaged in town meeting. They come that night, they think maybe they'll talk about that article or maybe not. So it's important that we let people know when we're going to be talking about things and over what period of time. And it's going to be critically important that the counselors work with the community participation officer. It's a town manager hire, like all the other positions, but if the council doesn't have some influence on how that community participation officer works, then we aren't going to see the kinds of results that people were hoping for when they wrote the charter, because we have all had different experiences with different groups as to how we can get other people to the table, and expecting just one person to know all those things would not be a realistic expectation.
Dylan.
Yeah, so I mean, how I would try to, engage people to let them know what's going on. I mean, trying new avenues like social media, we can get on there to engage a whole new group of people who otherwise wouldn't know or particularly care about this. I mean, the RMV is on social media. I think the council can get it together to do the same. I mean, yeah, just trying to go through whatever it is we can get the word out there. I know certainly doing traditional methods, but I find that usually engages people who are already engaged. So yeah, just trying to do new things. We live in a way where it's very easy to get out the word and to communicate with people instantly. I would say we try to utilize that and implement this to reach people who otherwise wouldn't be engaged with the process.
Jim.
There will be a communication participation officer hired by the town manager to assist in a lot of the things we are talking about. I would love to see nonpartisan district associations forming, similar to the District 1 Neighborhood Association. When the town council discusses the budget or has a school debate, there must be a clear timeline so the public knows when feedback is appropriate. We don't want decisions to be made and then ask for feedback. We need feedback and we need opinions before decisions are made. Town meeting had a different approach, and honestly, one of the flaws with town meeting is the legislative body came in at the end of the process after a lot of work had already been done by committees and by the select board and by the finance committee. This new change can be a good thing. If the public is informed correctly about when issues are being debated and when issues are brought before the council, then they can be informed on when feedback is appropriate, so the feedback happens before decisions are made. And finally, it's critical to reach out to the public in as many creative ways as possible. It's not enough to just sit someplace and have office hours. We need to go where the people are so we can hear from people who traditionally aren't heard from in the process.
Thank you, Rob. You're up first. How would you define the town's needs, including capital projects?
Thanks for asking. I was actually just looking at some of my notes on that. So one of the foremost things we need to do, and it's been unfortunately a divisive issue, is we need to build consensus on what to do about our two major elementary schools that were built now close to 50 years ago, Wildwood and Fort River. We need to find a way to either rebuild them or somehow renew the activities that are happening there in the existing buildings. And I think that's going to be a very difficult thing to do. I've walked South Amherst quite a bit in the last few weeks, and everyone there was telling me the most important thing is to have a third fire station. So I think that's something that's clearly a priority. When I moved to town 3 decades ago, I lived 5.5 miles from the closest fire station, and it's still 5.5 miles away down on Stagecoach Road. At the same time, I think we should look into perhaps co-locating a DPW facility with such a station. It may be a wise and economically prudent choice. The libraries, there are 3 of them in town, and I've enjoyed all 3 of them. The Munson was the one my son learned to read at. The North Amherst Library is one of the most charming buildings in the entire town. I think we need to focus on improving those libraries and preserving what we have at the Jones.
Thank you. Bob?
I have addressed the issue of the 4 large capital spending projects in my brochure. I think the schools come first, and I think we need to act faster than we're acting. That needs to be dealt with. The other projects are all meaningful projects that need to be done. At what pace can we do them, and in what order can we do them, and how much spending and override do we need to do them? That needs to be worked out. But I would support all 4 of those, although I agree with Rob, I would not support the current plan for renovating the Jones Library. I would focus more on the branches and figuring out how to deal with the Jones on a smaller scale renovation. Housing is always an issue and will remain an issue, and I hope if I'm on the council, I will be the seed of some new and creative ideas for dealing with that ever-perplexing problem. Taxes and spending. Maybe I'll save that one. Infrastructure. Why don't we get the roads fixed and the sidewalks and the dead trees cut down? We're going to have to spend that money anyway. I think we should look at maybe bringing some money up front and catching up with that so that we're not always trying to catch up. I think that's a very high priority.
Alyssa?
So we're never going to catch up on road repair, ever. Sorry, not going to happen no matter how much you raise your taxes. At the same time, there needs to be a different discussion about prioritizing things like road repair and sidewalk installations, taking care of sidewalks where trees are heaving them up, et cetera. And that all fits in around the edges of the 4 capital projects we always talk about. We talk about the 2 schools, a South Amherst fire station. I'm now hearing perhaps a 3rd station, but the assumption up until now has been that we would disband Central Fire Station and have a station further south. If 3 fire stations is really important to our community, then that's a different conversation we need to be having. We also hear, obviously, about library renovations for all 3 potentially, as well as the needs of our seniors who are feeling like they need more spaces and different types of spaces for the services they want to provide as our population is also aging. So we have a large number of town needs, and a lot of them do focus on maintenance. We have not been traditionally great at putting in maintenance. There was a meeting last night about the North Common property. If you're familiar with the tree boxes there, you know they've been there for decades. And we just tend not to do a lot in the area of maintenance. It's not been a high priority because we have so many other unmet needs. But I think that's a renewed focus we need to bring as a council, as a community, back to staff.
Dylan.
Yeah, so I think the schools are definitely a top priority for me. The idea of having kids split up with just dividers into the room rather than an actual wall separating classrooms doesn't seem that conducive to learning. So schools are definitely a top priority capital project for me. And the fire station, the DPW as well, but I'd spoken to Joe Lagasse, he's the president of the Firefighters Union, about what he wants for these capital projects, and he said, you know, first and foremost, he'll pack in like sardines in the current buildings we have if, you know, if they can get more staffing to actually protect the town. So, yeah, no, these capital projects are absolutely important, are absolutely a priority. They eventually will have to be done. I don't think we really gain anything by continuing to put them off for years as it's currently been happening. So I think we will have to address those. Again, the school buildings is my top priority, but I think over time it's, if not tackling them immediately, at least having a plan in place to address them over the years to come.
Jim.
The Fort River and Wildwood schools need to be rebuilt or replaced, and we need a South Amherst fire station. In my opinion, these are 2 facts and not opinions, I guess. We've had studies talking about a South Amherst fire station and the critical or serious response time that we currently have for, I think, as much as 50 years. We also need a new Department of Public Works. The current facility is old, the infrastructure is falling apart, and we need library renovations. Exactly what they are has to be determined, but there are things that need to be done. Another significant capital expense coming down the road is work on our senior center. The current facility is small and outdated and is really not meeting the needs of our seniors. Process here is critical. The council needs to hear about these projects. We need to get public feedback on these projects. We need to study them. We need to deliberate, and we need to act on them. So we need to have that process in place so the public understands when the feedback time is, when the opinion time is, but the council also needs to take action on this. I believe that with creative borrowing and use of tax funds, we can accomplish these projects. There have been presentations in the past to show how multiple projects can be funded at the same time. So I believe we need to move forward with a clear timeline and clear goals to reach this.
Mandy Jo.
You're going to hear it from me, you've heard it from them. The capital projects are some of our most urgent need. As Jim said, the firehouse has been talked about for South Amherst for about 50 years. It needs to be on the timeline and it needs to be done soon. Same with the Department of Public Works building, it's falling apart and we need to do something about it. Schools, we all know where that stands, and our children are in a less than ideal learning environment, so we need to deal with that, and we need to have community conversations around what dealing with it means and what the community wants and what is most fiscally responsible for the spending of our capital funds for that. Affordable housing for families is a town need. We've seen our schools population decreasing, and part of what we've heard is because housing is not affordable for families. So I think that is a town need. And I think just in general, sufficient housing in town for low and moderate income residents is a town need. And we definitely, as a town population and residents, need to have a conversation about planning, about the master plan, about what we want to see our village centers look like, about what we want them to look like, what we want to see in those areas, and have that conversation. That's a need we need. And I'd like to address in my last 10 seconds the senior center. I think we need to look broader than just a senior center. It does need expanded, but maybe look at a community center that could serve more than just seniors, that could serve families, that could serve school children after school, and have a broader device about that. Thank you.
Bob, you're up first. Our elementary school district spent $1.5 million on charter school payments last year, and our regional schools also lost $1.5 million to charter schools. What would you do as town councilor to oppose charter school expansions and to educate the public on this important issue?
That's a big one. I listened to the state senator speak to this. I am not an expert on this matter, but what I'm hearing again and again is the funding formula is broken and that needs to be fixed. And the other thing that I'm hearing is that, and I think the schools are doing it, as far as I can tell, they're doing it to the best of their ability, how to arrange their programming and their offerings in a way that helps them not to lose these students. But it seems to me the critical and most important part of this is the funding formula that's biased in the favor of charter schools. I'm done.
Alyssa.
The school committee and the select board have both worked on detailed letters associated with the brokenness of the funding formula. We've been talking about this with our legislators for many years, and in Western Massachusetts, they all seem to get it. They don't get it so much over some other parts of the state. Charter schools are not public schools. They don't have publicly elected school committee members. They don't have public oversight over their budget, but they do take public funding. The funding formula is absolutely broken, and it is incredibly difficult for any school to try and compete with the offerings that a charter school can offer. We keep trying, we keep finding different things that we are tweaking different ways, working on Chinese language again, for example, here in our schools. But as a counselor, it seems like the best we can do is continue to detail the impact on our community finances, meaning the impact on our school children because of the money that's flowing out, and continue to work with others to really change the formula.
Thank you. Dylan.
Yeah, I mean, so what would I do for, to educate people about, charter schools when it comes, like we had that vote a while ago to increase our charter schools? Really just get the word out about how ineffective charter schools actually are. We hear that they have higher success rates than regular public schools, and well, yeah, if you don't have to take special needs kids, that will definitely make it easier. If you really get your choice of who you let in, absolutely, your rates are going to look way better. Yeah, they operate cheaper as well, again, where they don't have to take in special needs kids and they don't have to deal with unionized teachers. That certainly cuts costs as well. So really trying to get that out there and trying to, what would I do as far as the state goes, really just try to lobby as hard as I can as a local representative that this isn't something that we want. Education is a public good, and it should be the public who provides that, not private industry that does it. So what would I do? I'd really just say the facts about it, because I really think the facts speak for themselves.
Jim.
I commend our schools on the efforts that they have made and are making to provide services that match or exceed those of the charter schools. However, what we really need, and I hope there will be, is a clear voice from the council to our state representatives that the funding formula must change.
I oppose expansion of charter schools, including the one that is currently being asked for down on Hadley at the Chinese charter school. And it's because the funding formula, as you've heard every every candidate say, is broken. And it is taking money from our local schools that is not allowing them to educate their children to the best that we want our town's children educated at. As a counselor, we need a council that is going to be out there publicly opposing expansions, both at a state level, as as the ballot question was a couple years ago, and at a local level, until that formula is fixed. We need a council that is advocating towards our representatives, but also to the department to get that funding formula fixed, so that our own local children and schools are not harmed by the charter schools. Thanks.
So I guess it's no surprise that I agree with almost everyone else who's spoken that the funding formula does seem to be a problem. And such formulas obviously have to evolve with time. And initially it was supposed to decay with time, but it doesn't seem to have happened. This is say the amount of funding that goes out for that. I do remember sitting somewhere in this vicinity, maybe it was as a select board member or some other capacity, a long time ago, when the people who founded the Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion Charter School were petitioning the Amherst schools to create a Chinese dual language immersion program. And I was a supporter of that petition, and it didn't happen. I don't know what happened on the way there, but it's not just the funding. It's people seeking something that makes a lot of sense. There's a large population in the town that was fluent in Mandarin, and a great interest in having more people learn it as a second language. It's a difficult language to learn. I'm heartened to hear that Fort River is being sought as a site perhaps for a dual language Espanol-Ingles program, which I think would be a nice thing to do. The point is that it's not just the funding formula, it's also the needs of people, things that people want to learn, and it would be great if we do it in our public schools. My son attended them, and I think that's the place to learn.
Alyssa, with all the new and planned development downtown, can we expect our taxes to go down or to rise more slowly?
Taxes are never going down. That's just not going to happen. What we hope for is that it slows the rate of increase. We have said for several years at the Select Board that we don't want to have an override. Do not plan on any budgets with overrides. And we haven't. We haven't had any overrides since 2010. And we should not be having any in the near future because our tax rate is too high to increase at this point beyond the normal growth. However, it is important to have some growth to try and ease the burden a little on residential homeowners. We have looked numerous times at if there was a way, like some communities in Massachusetts have done, to go ahead and give a sort of credit so that homeowners, residential homeowners, not homeowners who are renting their homes out to students, but residential homeowners would have more of a break and commercial would pay higher. You see that in more industrialized cities where the commercial does pay higher. We have not figured out a way to actually make that work to Amherst's advantage because too many people in our community actually are, what's the term, house poor, so that their house is actually worth so much in taxes that they would not see a substantial decrease for that, even as only 1 or 2 people living in the house. So we cannot just split the rate and say, oh, problem solved, we'll just charge the businesses more. It doesn't work well for Amherst. It works better in places with second homes or much more highly industrialized areas. So that is why we have been pursuing some level of commercial development.
Dylan.
Yeah, I know. I think the point of taxes never coming down might be the case because I know I wouldn't support any cuts in the services we provide, and over time we're going to need to increase the services that we need to provide. But I know right now that the tax burden we have, especially on seniors who are on fixed incomes, even when they own their home, it makes it very difficult for them to stay here, and I think we really have to do what we can. I think we should facilitate the growth of business in town. I think there's a lot more we can do for it. I think there's businesses that want to open here, and businesses that I'm sure we'd all like to see. I know a friend of mine actually just opened his company in Hadley. It's the Coral Reef Research Institute, and sounds like an interesting business. I'm sure it would have been fun to have over here in Amherst, but we didn't have the infrastructure for it, the private infrastructure for it. So, you know, I'd like to think that we could, you know, try to grow our commercial sector and really see if, you know, we can make a dent in there. And I'd like to see over time, if not bring down residential taxes for folks in town, to at least not make them the sole burden of the cost here in Amherst as we move forward.
I'll sign on to that statement. No, the taxes won't go down. Will development slow the rise? Perhaps a little. I'm very eager to see actual numbers on this. I really don't have the information in front of me at this point. But I do know that we must be very wary of ancillary costs that come with development and take care that development isn't costing us more than it should. One obvious concern is parking, and will there be future costs to parking because of the development? In terms of the development, and I may be jumping ahead to another question, I don't know, but our master plan, which was a great process, and there's some fascinating stuff there, our master plan talks about higher density as something that the entire town wished for, or certainly a majority of people wished for. But the master plan also talks about design standards that need to be in place to make sure that new development is in accordance with the character and needs of the community. So, no applause, please. So while we're talking about development and while we're talking about cost savings, we also need to think about ancillary costs of development.
So taxes are high, and they are driving, unfortunately, some residents out of town, some long-term residents that have been here for a while and don't want to move but cannot afford to live here anymore. It is potentially possible that if we increase our commercial property in town, and I would advocate doing so in accordance with our master plan with dense infill and all of that, and ensuring that it complies with the character of the town, that you might be able to decrease the rate of residential taxes, the tax rate on a residential property, because there's a state law that allows you to do a little bit of adjustment. For that adjustment to be meaningful, you need a larger percentage of your property taxes to be coming from commercial. So there's no guarantee that that could happen, but it's a potential possibility depending on what happens with development and whether that development's residential or commercial. So yeah, we definitely need to slow the rate of increase. Maybe we could stop it by increasing commercial development in accordance, as I said, with the master plan and in accordance with the character that we want to see in our town.
Well, I don't want to give a lecture on thermodynamics, but we have a community next door, Hadley, from which we were born several hundred years ago, about 263 years ago, perhaps. I don't remember, 269 years ago. 259 years ago, excuse me. It's going to be very difficult to increase commercial development in Amherst in light of the fact that it tends to be just a lot less expensive for many of the services that are provided that people want to purchase. They're provided more cheaply next door. I was on the Common yesterday, and I looked around at some of the buildings that line the Common, and I was a little bit alarmed to see how many for rent signs were in those commercial buildings. I think we need to be careful about balancing the rate at which we produce new space and the rate at which it can be utilized effectively. It's dangerous to overbuild. When I came to town, there was a place in Hadley called the Dead Mall. I don't know if you remember that. It's come back again. I think Whole Foods managed to help revitalize that. I think it was called Bread and Circus back then. But we need to keep a balance on this. And often once we build a space, it disappears. In my closing statement, I'll mention North Amherst Community Farm, but I think that's a good example of something that's both a commercial development and also something that preserved the environment. And we should be thinking about creative things like that, too.
Bob.
So this is an ongoing and endless task, and I think we can deal with it by not only trying to stimulate new growth, but by being careful about our spending. So we live in town. We bought a house in town. We have a modest income. We live here because we're careful in our spending. And I don't mind paying high taxes. We get a lot for it. I'm tired of this Hadley thing, right? Hadley, they pay so little tax. What do they have there? Look at their schools compared to Amherst School. Look at their library compared to Amherst Library. Look at their senior services and their recreation programs compared to Amherst. We get a lot for what we pay, but I understand there's a pressure. And I think not only being careful in the spending, but being very watchful on how we use the money that we have. And commercial growth is fine. We should do this, but as far as I can tell, no one can really document, we can say how much tax that's going to bring in, but what does it cost us in services? So we do the commercial development in the way that it needs to be done for that reason, not just for tax purposes.
Thank you. Dylan, what policies and structures can the town develop in order to foster and sustain a diverse, tolerant community?
Well, I think the biggest thing when it comes to diversity and what we can do is we have to have the representation of those people. I don't think there's anything that I can do to properly diversify for people of color. I don't have that experience. I don't know what that's like. So the best thing I could do in there would be to take a supporting role and to try to listen to the people who have these lived experiences and do the best to facilitate letting them represent themselves. Because if we want to talk about diversity, the best people to represent them, to represent that diversity is themselves. So I guess what I would do would really try to reach out to people of different class, race, ethnicity, whatever it is, and try to engage with them and ask, what can I do to help? What can I do to make this happen? But to not take a lead, to really try to take a supporting role, and that's how I think I would go about it.
As I've already said, Town Council needs to establish a clear process for hearing from the public, for studying issues, for making decisions, and we need to educate all residents on that process. There absolutely are underserved and underrepresented groups in Amherst that need to be reached. Holding office hours, meetings at Town Hall, at the middle school are not enough. We must reach out to people and find out where they live and congregate. Understanding how the town works and feeling that they're being respected and listened to is the first step in reaching underserved populations. When people feel engaged and when they feel that the process is legitimate, they will be willing to contribute their time and effort to committees, boards, and the town council. I'm hoping the community participation officer will assist in this process, as will the district council people and neighborhood associations. But as I said, it's critical that we reach out to people and find people where they congregate and educate them on how the process works so they can feel that they're a part of the process and that they're respected and listened to.
I agree, Jim. We need to reach out from the very beginning, not just at the end of processes. We need to have a process that starts before decisions are made, that finds a way to engage all residents, no matter what community or demographic that resident is from, to make sure that we're finding the voice of a diverse range of residents and opinions. Because if you're on a council and you only have one opinion represented, that's not going to lead to good decisions. You need to have a diversity of opinions represented not only on the council, but then the councilors need to be going out and finding the unrepresented opinions that are on the council by going to apartment complexes or other gathering locations where the underrepresented communities are, be it the Survival Center or be it an apartment complex down in South Amherst or in North Amherst, or another community like Amherst Community Connections, and talking to everyone and figuring out what they need, what they want, and what they think of the different policies coming out. I think by bringing them in and engaging them, we can help foster a tolerant community and a diverse community.
The Mothers Out Front group, as one of their questions, asked about how we would foster diversity in this community. And part of the question is what diversity means. And initially, when the League actually asked for a statement, I framed it as political diversity, because clearly we have, and here we are in a political forum, we have vastly divergent opinions about what to do that sometimes cuts completely across things that we might think of in a caricature way of racial or ethnic or economic class diversity. It's a complex problem. I answered that question then as fundamentally we're talking about encompassing politically diverse views and trying to build consensus. I mean, this government is not based on consensus. And in fact, I looked at the frame Constitution of Pennsylvania when it was still a proprietorship, even though it was founded by the Society of Friends, which did most of their business using consensus. It didn't use that. And we don't have to use that, but it'd be good to try to aim for consensus in decision making. And that involves embracing not only people who look different from us, but who think differently from us. I invite you to read my response to the Mothers Out Front thing, because I included some more personal things that I learned and that you wouldn't be able to tell just by looking at me, but I think you might find it interesting. So thank you.
Yeah, so all the candidates were sent the list of questions from Mothers Out Front, and from the Springfield Republican also asked us to address this question of diversity. So I think we all answered those questions. I know my answer is posted on my website. So we all really support this idea of participation and inclusion. I don't think there's anyone here that doesn't support those values. And we all recognize that diversity of viewpoints leads to better outcomes. So we have the schools, we have the senior center, we have service agencies like Amherst Community Connection, the Survival Center, and the library. These are all locations in town where we can reach out to people. And so I think we're doing this. Can we do a better job? You can always do a better job.
Melissa.
We can definitely always do a better job. We've tried to do some simple things, like we have a citizen activity form, which some of us would rather call a resident activity form, but to be on the committees that we talked about earlier. When we updated that at one point, we said, let's ask about renters. And we said, we'd love to have more renters on committees. And we had people come to us and say, you're obviously discriminating against renters. That's why you're asking that question. So we always have to be questioning assumptions about why we're doing things the way we are, why we changed the male-female box to an open box, et cetera, so that we are constantly thinking about why have we always done it this way, and we keep getting the same results. We're doing better at things like having meetings about Groff Park renovations near where Groff Park users that walk there from their apartment complex can actually go to. We are a sanctuary community. A whole lot of different people associated with a lot of different groups came together to work out a way to define ourselves that way. But we need to constantly be looking at, why do people want to be involved? Everybody sitting out here, you've surely been to something like this before. It's unlikely you have never been to town meeting or served on a committee or served in elected office. We need to be able to explain to people, why should they care? they've got 2 jobs, they've got kids to get back and forth to daycare, and those are some of the voices that we are missing when we make assumptions based on our personal histories as to why those people are involved or not involved. We need to be looking broader.
Jim, what are your ideas of how town development can sustain the distinct nature of our town? Can safeguards be put in place so we do not have a repeat of tall apartment buildings?
Thank you. First, I want to be clear that I am not against development downtown and in village centers. But I do want to see our zoning bylaws revisited and strengthened. I want to see, personally, a 4-story height limit. I want to see set-asides for low-income housing that can't be passed over easily by waivers. I want to see some more parking included or discussed in these buildings so we don't lead to future problems of not enough parking. The current track record with the 3 developments, Kendrick Place, 1 East Pleasant, and Spring Street, have some scary numbers. There's 172 apartments. This is an aggregate total. 548 bedrooms, 36 parking spaces, and 0 designated affordable apartments. I want to see, and this is in accordance with what the master plan is asking, I want to see the council go back and look carefully at our zoning bylaws and get feedback from the public and come to some decisions to change our bylaws to make the development look the way we and the town envision it looking. Again, I'm not against development. I think development and change can be a good thing. But through changes to the zoning regulations, which have to follow feedback from the public, I think we can be in better control of the development.
So one idea that I support for keeping our character, some of the things we love about Amherst, is form-based zoning, which sounds, not, a lot of people don't understand what it's asking because it's so technical. But what it does is it tries to allow a zoning code that allows the permit granting bodies, the planning board and the zoning board of appeals, to kind of control a little bit more about the look of a building so that it fits into the streetscape of the neighborhood it's going into, that it fits into the character of the town so that it doesn't look out of place. I think that's one concrete thing we can do to help preserve the distinct nature of our town. I think we also need to look at the master plan. I support the master plan and infill development. We have a very small area in town that can even have any commercial development compared to the rest of the town that is already preserved. But I think we need to look at that and look as a community and have community conversations about what do we want that streetscape to actually look like? What kind of businesses do we want in there? And if we can go into that with an idea and a plan, then our planning boards and our ZBA boards can go and look at any plan that comes to them and say, does it fit into that idea that our entire our residents have for what we want, what kind of streets we want, what kind of businesses we want, and everything.
I'm going to speak not only as a former select board member who appointed many people to the Zoning Board of Appeals 15 years ago, so they're not 13 years ago, so they're probably no longer serving. But before that as a conservation commissioner, where in effect I had to serve as an administrative law judge. And the strictness with which conservation commissioners enforce the local and the state and occasionally federal wetlands laws, it's very strict. I think some of the problems we've had with the downtown buildings lies not with the stars, but with, well, you know the rest of that line. The boards themselves granted waivers that go beyond what was required in the law. I guess if they're allowed to grant the waivers, then we get what we get. I agree with Mr. Pistrang that the result has been buildings that are taller than expected, perhaps, but it's really the volume that's bigger. The buildings loom over the public space. There are buildings in town, and Whalen and Clark House, which are actually taller than the ones along Pleasant Street. But I agree that we need to do something about this. The buildings are poorly designed, in my opinion, and way too dense. And although the dream is that the occupants will use transit, the prospect that instead the large buildings will be used to insist upon parking garages, things like that, I think bode ill for the town's future finances and culture.
So I've already stated that this, I think, is the single most defining issue of this election. And I'm still puzzled as to how it ever happened, because I don't hear a lot of support for it. UMass obviously has grown enormously, and this has put a lot of pressure on an already troubled housing situation. It may be that we need these buildings, but not in the downtown. That's mistaken. It doesn't belong there. And I agree with Mandy that we need to unite around a master plan that we agree on and use those guidelines to clearly outline our future. But I think think about it. We're Amherst. We're full of experts and artists and designers and amazing people. We can do better than what we're seeing. We need creative and innovative infill. We need to take our downtown and make it more beautiful. So I hate to compare to another community, I'll probably get criticized, but when I walk around Provincetown, I see small, organic, creative infill that's beautiful, sculptural, and architectural. And I want Amherst to be that way. I want it to be a delight to walk through the town and look at the buildings.
Alyssa.
I do want to preserve the distinct nature of our town, but I won't say that there can never be another 4 or 5-story building. That's simply not something I'm willing to state at this point. But it is important to talk about form-based code. Town meeting turned down form-based code twice for a variety of reasons, partly because it sounds strange and it wasn't completely understood, and partly that's due to the nature of the process. That's something I think we could do a lot better with, associated with the new way the planning board will be working with the council on these issues, and so that we can look at the master plan more carefully. I've tried to refrain from talking about the master plan myself because I did serve for 6 years on the comprehensive planning committee, did chair it for 2 years, and it still took several years after that for the plan to actually get through the planning board. But that's what a master plan does. It goes through a planning board. Now we have a charter that says the council needs to look at the master plan. It says the community needs to be part of the master plan again, because some of those people don't live here anymore and some of them still do. And so we need to have those conversations again, bringing to life the elements of our master plan, which do not disagree with 5-story buildings downtown, and was supported by a huge number of residents back then in a variety of different settings over hundreds and hundreds of hours.
Dylan.
Yes, I mean, I live right across the street from those two big buildings that are just going up, including one East Pleasant. And you know, I hear a lot about form-based code. You know, make it look like the buildings around it. And I'll say right now, I'm not a huge fan of the aesthetic of those buildings, but I know what was there in the downtown. What's currently still there is we have Amherst Print and Copy and the Spoke and great businesses, but that building's just a box sitting right there. It's not very aesthetically pleasing as it is right there in that area, right in our downtown. And I know it's slated that there might be 2 more large buildings going right there. And what I'm really concerned about is, you know, what's going to happen to those 2 businesses? What's going to happen to, you know, the Spoke? What's going to happen to Amherst Copy and Print? I think Jim touched on this as well. I think that it shouldn't be that difficult to conform to what's around to keep something aesthetically good looking. I know when I was in Ohio, I'd seen a parking garage made of brick that fit the surroundings perfectly, very aesthetically pleasing. It's not that difficult. I think the real difficulty is going to be what's the impact of this new development going to be on the people who are already there, and that's my biggest concern when it comes to development.
All right, so Mandy Jo, how will you support more affordable housing?
I think we can do so. I mean, we need to support more affordable housing for both low and moderate income individuals and for families. There are multiple ways a town council can help support that. One is through if nonprofits apply for Community Preservation Act funds or community block grant funds. Sometimes we are a block grant town, that the organizations that are looking at dispersing those funds recommend to the town council to provide money to build more affordable housing. I think a town council and I would support approving the recommendation of those two bodies for funding some more affordable housing in town. Town meeting has done an admirable job in trying to adopt some zoning changes to allow for various affordable housing items, including smaller units and single occupancy units. And I think we can continue to do that to help build more affordable housing so that we can have a sufficient number of affordable housing.
I see people are leaving because this is the most interesting topic, zoning. I've written part of the zoning bylaw, the open space community development portion. It hasn't been used much, but one of the things we used to do is we tried to keep our at least 10% affordable housing stock level in place by asking, insisting to the extent to which we can that large projects like some that have been built downtown in the Amherst Center have at least 10 or 12 or some slightly higher percentage of affordable units in them. I'm not sure how these slip through without having at least that fraction of affordability, but they have. On the other hand, we've built affordable housing in smaller quanta around town. North Amherst Community Farm put in an affordable duplex right on North Pleasant Street that involved, I believe, Habitat over on Southeast Street. Some of Amherst College's properties have 4 nice affordable units that I think Mr. Morse and I worked on years and years ago. I don't know if he remembers that. But lots of smaller, affordable projects together with the large ones that are done by private developers, but also supporting the Affordable Housing Trust that has been before, well, this is not town meeting more recently. I think that's another good way to do that, to have public input of funds towards affordable housing as well as the private support for it. Thank you.
This is not an area of my expertise, but it's definitely a high priority for me. So it would be in sharp focus if I were on the council. And we do have the Amherst, if I can get the name right, Amherst Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We have this grassroots neighborhood organization that now represents all of Amherst called the Amherst Community Land Trust. And so there were 2 organizations. So we need, and I think the other thing that has to be kept in focus is that how much affordable housing can we afford? Affordable housing costs money, and we have a lot of priorities. So yes, we need to work on it, and we need to figure out how much we can do at what rate, working with these agencies and gathering the resources of our own town planners and thinking about not just privately funded. We may have to consider, not so easy, I know, but 2 of our star projects are the Clark House and the Ann Whalen that were built. So I know that was done historically at a certain time with certain conditions, but are there opportunities like that for us today? Those are really prized affordable housing projects of our town, and we need more of them.
Alyssa.
So we know our basic conditions. We're rightfully proud of being one of the very few municipalities in Massachusetts that actually has 10% of our units qualified for the state's 40B subsidized housing inventory. But we know there are many people who can't afford to live here, who work here and would like to live here. We also have other people living here who would like to move to a smaller unit but can't, based on the way our market works. An enormous proportion of our buildable land is either owned by educational institutions or in agricultural protection. So traditional builders don't want to build anything like the starter homes like I live in from the past. The current market also rewards owners of outdated single-family homes who rent to multiple college students rather than renting to small families. So we need to come to agreement about where smaller units can be built. We sometimes have problems talking about things like supplemental apartments, talking about SROs. We need to figure this out with accessible, dependable public transportation rather than worrying about building one parking space per resident, and then figure out a way to have a financial benefit to partnerships willing to build those units, just as we've supported the work of the very exciting Community Land Trust, Municipal Housing Trust. Those are both very new in comparison to other things we've done in the past, and we have done a good job of leveraging our community development block grant money and our CPA funds, but we need to continue to look at these other creative options. And I will also point out that nothing slips through. It was not that projects were approved and something slipped through. It's that those projects were not required to have affordable units.
Dylan.
Yeah, so I mean, housing affordability in Amherst is really one of my top priorities. You know, I'm a renter in town. Many of my friends were also renters in town, and they keep leaving because it's too expensive to be here. And I support development, but I know development isn't, you know, the cure-all solution to this. We just had those buildings, as I said, go up right across the street from me, and my rents didn't go down. So I think one of the ways we can really tackle this is I think we do have to really enforce zoning laws to facilitate the development of smaller units, more affordable units for people. And I think we have the demand here in town that we can get those built. I don't support initiatives like giving grant money to real estate developers to develop the affordable homes. That always seems strange to me, as spending public money to pad private industry's profits. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's if that's what we have to do to get affordable housing developed here in town, you know, I'm willing to do it, because I think if we don't tackle this issue of housing affordability, eventually all you're going to see is Amherst is wealthy people who own their homes, and then every small family home converted to student housing. And I'd really like to see the community thrive into the future rather than people, you know, keep leaving because it's too pricey to be here.
James.
I've got to say it's more fun going last than it is going first on the questions. So a couple things come to mind. We do have an inclusionary zoning bylaw that's working in some areas, but not in others. I would like to see small incremental changes that would increase the volume of low-income housing without shutting down development. I would also like us to explore and pursue the possibilities of public-private student housing on UMass campus. If we could get more housing on UMass campus, it could perhaps ease the pressure on neighborhoods to avoid starter houses and low-income rental units being snapped up by student landlords. I would also like to see the development of a 40R district in Amherst. This is a district that would support development of studio apartments for low-income individuals.
We have time for one more question. Rob, it goes to you first. What are the sources of funding for your campaign? Please be specific.
At the moment, my own pocketbook.
Bob.
So, same for me. I'm actually a public employee. I work at Holyoke Community College, so I cannot accept funds, although I could have treasurer or other people accepting funds. But as of now, I've supported all of the expenditures, which are rather modest.
Melissa?
So the campaign finance reports haven't all been posted as of today on the town website, even though they were filed Monday or prior to Monday by some people who filed early, which was great. But you will see that my sources of funds at this point in time tend toward my personal loan. Also, my parents gave me money. They live out of state. They decided they wanted to support the campaign that way, and rather than treating that as a gift, I made sure I reported it as a campaign expense. And you will also see several small donations. I have actually not done a huge amount of fundraising at this point for a couple of reasons. One is because people see me all the time, and there are a large number of new candidates for both council and state rep and state senate that I know is taking a lot of people's attention. So I have not spent a ton of other people's money on my race at this point.
Dylan.
I've really only gotten a few donations, some from family, some from friends. A couple people I've met and talked to and told them what I'm about said that they wanted to support my campaign as well. But I think the highest contribution I received was about $150 from my best friend's father. So you know, typically that's the revenue stream. People who've already known me and you know, would like to support my campaign. So.
Hi. I kicked off my campaign with a personal loan from myself, which I fully hope and expect to be paid back. I've set my own personal, somewhat arbitrary limits on a cap of $100 per donation, and I am only accepting donations from Amherst residents. Actually, within like 15 minutes of when my donate webpage went up, we got a donation from an old Frisbee buddy of mine who's living in Arizona, which we did send back to him.
So, as with everyone else, I think it's friends, friends and family. On my campaign report, you'll see a donation from Pennsylvania that is my parents. They indicated that it is the first time they've ever donated to a political campaign. So that is the out-of-state donation on the campaign report, is my mother and father. But yeah, friends in Amherst, a few from Northampton, but mostly Amherst residents.
Sounds like it's an expensive proposition to run for council. So we've finished the question portion of our evening, and we're going to have closing statements now, 2 minutes each, and we are beginning with Bob.
So, participation and inclusion and diversity of thought leads to the best outcomes. And you already know that my top priority and major reason for running is to redirect what is currently happening in our town center. What I see in our downtown is filling up with expensive student housing. It seems to me that the current and projected buildings, if built, will primarily, if not exclusively, be occupied by students. These buildings are effectively dormitories in our town center. I urge every citizen of Amherst to let your opinion be known. If this trend is the wish and will of the people, I accept it. If it is not, we must act decisively to develop and implement a fresh, creative vision for the future of our town center that will extend and enhance the unique and attractive character of the current town center. Know that it is possible to grow organically and with a creative flair that will extend and enhance those qualities we love and desire from our town center. As a counselor, this will be a high priority. Some of you may reluctantly support this trend in the hope that tax revenues that may ease the constant upward spiral of tax increases will help fund the 4 capital spending projects that we want. To you, I say the price is not worth the uncertain benefit. Associated costs of infrastructure, support services, parking may eclipse the tax benefit you are hoping to realize. Please ask yourself, do you support the current radical and irreversible change to the face of our downtown center?
Alyssa.
Thank you all. My website, alyssaforamherst.com, focuses on 3 areas: local economy, transparent governance, and proven leadership. I hope you'll check it out along with my campaign Facebook page, Alyssa Brewer for Town Council. And instead of the traditional list of names, my website also includes a list of endorsement statements reflecting how I've worked with people in our community. I just came from an international student reception this afternoon, and I want to point out that I love students. even when they're peeing in my yard, which they do on a regular basis. Because that's what Amherst is about. We are about our educational, not about the peeing, although we could use public restrooms. It is about the students. And I think it's fine for them to live downtown. And in fact, this will help educate them on the future of having fewer cars, using public transportation to get around, being practical at the formative stage of their development. So I am fine with that, although I would also embrace a public-private partnership, which we have been pushing for over 20 years with UMass and UMass in Boston, not UMass Boston, but the President's office is having a little trouble comprehending how we might do public-private dormitories here. So, on that note, please vote for Alyssa at large on Tuesday, September 4th, because your brand new council needs members who know how things work now while making things work better for all of us in the future. Thank you.
Dylan.
Oh, well, thank you all so much for listening to me here tonight, and I hope I've managed to convey a little bit more about who I am and what I represent. I'm sure I've managed to convey I'm not the greatest public speaker, but something throughout this campaign that I've heard a lot of people tell me when we made this switch to the new council is that they worried that they wouldn't see representation, and I had that same worry, and that's why I'm running. And it's well-to-do folks usually say they have the working class people's interests at heart. And in the case of many of the candidates up here, I believe that to be true. But I know a lot of the people here, they won't feel the impact of what their policies do to people in town, whether or not they're really effective, where is something that I would. I really think it is important to actually have self-representation incorporated into the council. So, I mean, if you want somebody who knows what it's like to have your car making some weird noise and just have to turn up the radio and just accept that because you don't have the funds to get that fixed. If you want somebody who knows really how hard it is to just get by sometimes, this is what I'm about, this is what I'm running for, and these are my values, this is what I represent. And if this is something that you want to see represented in the town council, then I ask you please to consider me one of your 3 votes coming up on Tuesday, Dylan Maxfield, September 4th. Thank you so much.
Over the past few months, I've been reaching out to individuals and groups in Amherst to hear their thoughts on matters of importance to our town. What strikes me the most is the passion that people feel about issues that are important to them, and also that passions and priorities differ among residents of Amherst. In order to promote public trust and broad participation, issues coming before the council must follow a clear and transparent timeline, including how and when an issue is placed on the agenda, how and when committees will study and report on an issue, how and when the public will provide feedback, when the council will discuss and deliberate on the issue, and when the council will vote on the issue. I want to contribute my skill and expertise to this deliberation and decision-making process. I hold a detailed knowledge of Amherst's structure of bylaws, boards, committees, and staff. I understand the steps necessary to build budgets and craft zoning regulations, and I have the skill set to help establish council processes and guidelines and ensure that they are followed. It is important for the council to take prompt action to deal with our pressing needs. There will always be some who disagree with the outcome, but there should be a broad belief that a fair and transparent process has been followed. An immediate priority of the council will be to dive into the fiscal year budget process and to review and appoint or reappoint committee members. Both items must involve public feedback, including reaching out to underserved and typically unheard members of our community. My experience as town moderator has taught me the value of listening to and respecting all voices in town. And I believe I can play a critical role in reducing acrimony and polarization and fostering an atmosphere of safety and trust. I hope that you will visit my campaign website at jimforamherst.org to learn more about me, ask questions, and send me your comments, and that you will cast one of your votes for me in the upcoming election. Thank you.
Thank you to the League for hosting us tonight. If elected, I will prioritize public participation in Amherst government, and I have the experience to do it. As vice chair of the Charter Commission, I worked hard to listen to all opinions by organizing and attending over 16 public forums. We held these sessions throughout the entire process, taking feedback we received back to our meetings and considering it, and sometimes even altering our decisions based on that feedback. We really did listen. If elected, I'll work to form even more partnerships with apartment complexes, nonprofits, and businesses in order to continue and expand on these efforts. We need to go where the people are instead of making the residents come to us, and we need to do it early and often. If elected, I'll ensure responsible funding of capital projects. I'll also work toward making rental housing for families more affordable and providing an adequate supply of low and middle income housing. In doing this, I'll seek to pass form-based zoning in order to make sure that any new buildings fit into the character of their surroundings. Amherst has many challenges facing it, as you've heard tonight. If elected, I'll work on involving more residents in those decisions, improving our infrastructure, and planning in a responsible, coherent, and deliberate manner that maintains the character of our town. The first council will set important operational precedents. My focus on an open, transparent, and inclusive decision-making process will result in a way that gives voice to Amherst's residents and keeps them informed about what's going on in the town council. My experience, leadership, and collaborative efforts, both in government and in the community, will be valuable to the First Council. You can find more information about my positions at my website, votehaneke.org, and I hope that after hearing me tonight and looking there, you'll vote for me, Mandy Jo Haneke, this coming Tuesday, September 4th, for Town Councilor at Large. Thank you.
Do I have the last word?
You have the last word.
Okay. It's tempting to rebut many of the comments made in the closing statements, but I have to admit that I agree with many of them, so I'd like to incorporate them and then add a few words, if I may. First of all, Ian McCarg, a landscape architect, is actually I think the progenitor of form-based code, and I think you should take a look at the Wikipedia article on that. It's not single-valued. It's very complicated, many variations on it, and the devil will be in the details. So I also think that Design with Nature, which is the book by McCarg, is a great guide. But what's actually in place in various communities is worth taking a look at. I really take a look at the Wikipedia article on form-based code before you jump into it. Anyway, I'd like to say that besides many of the specific policy positions that we've discussed tonight, one of the things that is important to me is trying to lead by consensus building. I did this for the decade that we worked to redesign and reconstruct the Norwottuck Rail Trail. There were many, many different positions and points of view from people very directly involved in both funding the project and regulating the project. And I was very happy to work with people over that time to put into place a plan and actually implement the plan in a way that I think people love. One of my favorite things is I ask people who used that trail decades ago, and I asked, do you notice any difference? And they don't even notice it. So some of the things that we did to improve it are invisible. If only some parts of downtown Amherst were similarly improved, we would probably be very happy, but unnoticeable but really good changes. The other thing I want to say is the following, that we've experienced actually a fairly cool evening here, but this is one of the reasons why we need to invest more in public transit and other environmentally friendly things. We're about to hit 450 parts per million CO2, and I think, thank you.
Thank you. And I want to remind voters that there is a 7th candidate running for the at-large seat who could not be here this evening, and that's Andrew Steinberg. And I want to thank all of the candidates. I think Amherst is very lucky to have such a slate and such people who care so much about their community. Lucky community Amherst is. So let's give them an applause. Yes, it's been a hot night. I do want to thank you all for coming and making this possible and becoming better and informed voters. And also remember, it's Tuesday, day after Labor Day. It's, you're going to wake up Tuesday and, you're just going to be getting back on track, but go vote. Thank you so much, and I thank the League thanks Amherst Regional Middle School for hosting. Thank you, everyone.